I might not be the best or the strongest candidate here, but I do have a reasonable chance and I do have a good story. And if not me, then who?
Hello, everyone. This is How Did You Get In, a conversational podcast with people who got into the world's top business schools. We'll be talking with these applicants, hearing about their tips, tricks, and secrets to success. We welcome you to the show.
Joining us on today's episode is Linda Lee, a close friend of ours who was in Section I along with Julia and myself while we were all at HBS. Julia and Linda actually met during their interview days at Yale and then again at HBS, whereas I didn't have the pleasure of meeting Linda until the first day of class. Prior to the first day, we were supposed to prepare a 20-word statement or hook that kind of captured who we are as a person. A lot of people had like some pretty touching, emotional, even inspiring statements. And then comes Linda, who gives a 20-word snippet about her online dating profile and that you should swipe left if you're a serial killer. All that to say, she definitely captured my attention and I was like, yep, I'm going to make her my friend. Fast forward to today, Linda is working for a mental health startup in strategy and ops and living in Oakland, California with her boyfriend Garrett and adorable new Aussie Doodle puppy Panuki. We are so happy to have you here with us today, Linda. Welcome.
Thank you. I will say that that intro for the dating profile definitely worked. So
that's how you got Garrett to swipe
to swipe right because he wasn't a serial killer.
Yeah.
Amazing. She works for mental health and she gives dating advice. So she's a jack of all trades. I remember meeting Linda first at the HBS interview, super nervous in my one good suit. And then later that week went for my Yale interview in Yale sort of tour day and saw Linda there. And we were both wearing the same outfits we had been wearing that Monday during the HBS interview. And I just ran up and she gave me a big hug and I knew I was going to be friends with her from then on and was lucky enough to then get to be in her section. So, so excited to have you, Linda. To kick us off, we'd love for you to share with the listeners a little bit more about your background. Where are you from? Where'd you go to undergrad? And what were you doing before you applied?
Yeah, so I was actually born in Beijing, China, but I moved to Ohio, moved to Akron, Canton, Ohio when I was like 1.5. So very much Americanized, very much Midwest upbringing. I went to public school all throughout my life and then went to NYU for undergrad. Specifically, I went to the Stern Undergraduate School of Business. I thought at the time that I wanted to study finance, not knowing what it was. And then I realized that, finance is not what I expected it to be. But that was, after a couple of years working in banking. I was working in credit risk as a credit analyst for a long time at JP Morgan, and then made a really pivotal shift, I would say, in my career into impact investing. Worked for a small startup at the time in Boston called Social Finance, not to be confused with SoFi, very different companies. Social Finance worked to structure social impact bonds. And at the time, I thought that was just the absolute coolest thing. Then went to HBS, and the rest is history.
And so what was your mindset while you were at Social Finance and you're like, yep, I should actually go through with the application process?
Yeah, it's definitely very nervous because at the time we're a pretty small organization. At the time we were probably like 20 or 30 people, but there were 4 other associates who were applying to business school alongside me. And so I think at the time, it's like impossible not to compare yourself with other people. And I was really fortunate to be at an organization where I honestly thought everyone there was like smarter than I was and worked harder and was like more accomplished. And so a lot of like my insecurities came from the fact that I think the people around me were just so awesome. And I was like, well, what am I? Like, if they're going to apply, like, how the heck am I going to even have a chance? But I think at the end of the day, it was a lot of luck, a lot of hard work, and people were really nice. Like everyone actually worked together. We really helped each other. I would say we were each other's cheerleaders. So that's
awesome. I felt the same at Wayfair. There was 5 people applying, including myself at the same time. And we were pretty collaborative. We were like, oh, do you want to split the cost on, this essay packet or what have you? And so, yeah, I think that helps. It's like you're still, at the end of the day, comparing yourselves to them a little bit, but it's nice to have them be, a companion through the process and not an enemy.
That's so
it's funny. I didn't feel like I needed to hide because I was really close with my direct manager at the time. And I had made it really clear like a year and a half ago that I was like, hey, business school, I really want to do this. It's just something that's one of my personal goals. And he was like, yeah, cool. I never did that route, but I'd support you. Just, let me know when that time comes so that we can make preparations. So I think I gave him like a really long ramp of when I was going to leave. And then it also helped because then 3 of my recommenders for various schools actually were people at work. And so I didn't feel like I needed to hide or be unauthentic.
Which is so nice.
Yeah.
And so, you did an undergraduate business degree and you were working in finance. What were you hoping to get out of business school?
I think my finance education at Stern was very much like geared towards banking and like bold bracket. And it was really narrow, I think, of a thinking because we had no exposure to like consulting. We had no exposure to startups at the time. People didn't care about like supply chain or like operations. Like people just wanted to work at like the big banks in New York City. And maybe that was just by nature of the people that I was hanging out with. And I was also pretty ignorant at the time and just kind of followed the flow of the crowd. But going to business school was a very intentional shift to say like, oh, there's a lot that I just don't know. I need to broaden my horizons. I need to meet new people. I need to be in uncomfortable situations. Let's give this a try.
How did going to business school like first enter your mind? Did you have colleagues and friends who had went that gave you the idea as a way to go broaden your mind? What was your inspiration for looking that as your source of change?
Twofold. One was like internally, I feel like just growing up Chinese, my family all have like graduate degrees. So I feel like graduate degrees wasn't really a question almost. It was just like, what do you want to go study? Like, what's the next step? My dad had gone to business school as well. And he thought he had like a great time. And I thought maybe that's the right route. It would give me a lot more flexibility and freedom to kind of do different things. And I'll preface this by saying I may have like tailored my application in one particular way to highlight my strength, but I knew going in that wasn't what I was going to narrow myself into. I actually really wanted to explore.
Which actually, so can you like elaborate a little bit on that? Like how did you tailor your application but like, what were you actually hoping to explore?
Yeah. So I remember this statistic when I was like going through all of like the business school, like, meet the admin, like team type of those days. I don't know, like the welcome, the intro meetings. I don't know. And one of the statistics was like, we like polled our applicants and like 70% of people did not end up in the field that they said that they would or that they wanted to pursue from their essays and from their application. And I found that really shocking. And so it's not meant to be like, I think the perspective that I took in my application wasn't disingenuous. It was just at that time, this was like the strongest field that I think I could portray myself in. And I had the most interest in. Knew that there was more that I wanted to explore. So because I was in impact investing, I thought that was a little bit more unique. I think I came from like traditional finance, but because I wasn't coming in from like a banking, consulting type of typical business school track, I felt like impact investing was a little bit more unique. Plus, I was coming into school from impact investing and I wanted to stay in impact investing. And so felt like I had more to offer in the view of, well, this is why I want to go to school and this is how I want to apply what I learned from school into the industry itself. So I think that's kind of the perspective that I took. And at the time, it was very much so true. I think just in the matter of the 2 years, though, people change. COVID happens. A lot changes.
Yeah, which we'll definitely get into later.
One of the beauties of business school is learning about different industries. Would you mind just taking a minute to just quickly describe what impact investing is in case any of the listeners haven't heard of it?
Yes, I still very much love what impact investing is. And now there's a whole spectrum, I think, of what that kind of terminology entails. A lot of it's just taking really traditional kind of finance means like raising money, right? Or business, like good business acumen and good business practices. You're applying it into spaces that have impact on people, on lives. So specifically, we would raise capital, similar to any kind of investment bank, but instead of funding companies, for-profit companies, the money that we raised from investors funded social programs. And we tracked outcomes that were linked to positive, like human outcomes, like a great indicator of early childhood reading and education is being able to read by the third grade. Because by that time, by the third grade, you stop learning to read and you start reading to learn. And so it's actually a really strong indicator of how well students will perform later on in their more formative years. And so our investors would only get paid back if our social programs that we invested also improved on the outcomes for these kids. Now there's a lot of like complicated things involved. It's like, oh, well, that's like so strange. Like, what if you like game the system and you like force these kids to like get better scores? I think the nuances there are really complex. And that's why I loved working in this space. There is just so many really bright, smart, passionate people trying to make impact and trying to do good and trying to use different means to do that. So that's just one example, but there's like so many other things. The industry now is so strong, like even any ESG funding, anything that's like, I would say even just like startup funding, but in like very rural areas or in Southeast Asia or Sub-Saharan Africa. Like all of these are such cool projects that both have a lot of kind of, I think, monetary gain, but also like human impact and positive impact gains.
Amazing.
And what's great is, for listeners not aware, HBS's mission is to educate leaders who will make a difference in the world. And with impact investing, clearly you're already making a difference prior to applying, which is great. You're teeing yourself up as like, hey, I'm already checking the box, HBS, like I will continue to be leading in this, which is great. And it's also, I mean, it's cool. Like a lot of our classmates wanted to get into impact investing, and you could actually bring that perspective already to the classroom. And I do remember you weighing in on cases that were more impact focused with a great, or I learned from your comments. So, you know.
Yeah. Most of the times when I made comments, I think I blacked out. So
you function well as a blackout. I mean, so clearly your background, you have a fascinating story from big banks to impact investing. And that's part of your story and was part of your application. Another part is the stats. Would you mind going through and talking about your GMAT score, your undergrad GPA, job title at the time of applying, sort of those facts and figures that everyone looks for?
My GMAT score was a 710. Mind you, I had to take the GMAT 3 times, and it was so miserable because the first time I took it, I got a 590. The second time I took it, I got a 610. And then finally was just like praying to God, oh my goodness, I just need something above like a 680 and I'm good. And then I don't know how, was very lucky, got the 710. But I will have to say it doesn't come naturally to everybody. GPA wise, I think I was a 3.5 rounded up. And then my title at social finance was an associate director.
Which I feel, can you give some context? Like a director in your title sounds very impressive. What does that actually mean in the world of finance?
I think it's in a similar vein of like, we kind of tracked in the somewhat of like it's like analyst and like associate director, then director. So I would say associate director was probably somewhere in like a manager level or a senior associate type of a role.
Awesome. And how many schools did you applied to? I think you said 3. Which ones were they?
Yes, I had every intention of applying to 3. I lost a lot of steam after the HBS application, but I applied to HBS and Yale SOM, and then didn't get around to applying to Stanford. But thank goodness things worked out. Yeah,
it was meant to be.
It absolutely was. Why did you pick those schools? There's so many good business schools out there. Why were those the 3 and then eventually 2 that you chose to apply to?
It was really clear from the get-go that HBS and SOM were going to be at the top of my list. Both just at the time had really outstanding social enterprise, social impact programming at the business school itself. I think Yale is really well known for a lot of their nonprofit management. And then HBS at the time had just rolled out their impact investing course. They had the impact investing club. And so I really felt like there was a lot of attention placed on the industry, and it wasn't just going to be like, oh, like nonprofit, that's like such a nice to have. It really felt like there was a concerted effort at the school to focus on that industry. Stanford was on my list because at the time I was living in San Francisco. My family's out here, my partner was out here, and so I wanted to stay closer. But the organization that I was at, Social Finance, we were a startup. And I kind of really loved that culture, and then couldn't help but feel that there are a lot of ways that small companies and small organizations could make a big difference. Stanford has such a great kind of startup-y program. And the people that I talked to there were really kind of mission oriented, whatever that mission would be. And so I knew that being with that type of a cohort would also be really beneficial to my education and experience.
Interesting. One quick follow-up question, how was it applying to school with a partner, especially applying to schools on the other coast? Do you mind speaking a little bit about that experience and how you talked to your partner during your application process?
Yeah, I might have misled you there. I met Garrett probably the week before welcome weekend for HBS. So he didn't even know when we had just started dating that his potential girlfriend was going to be gone for the next 2 years and probably just leave. It was so awkward. But at the time I was seeing a different person, also didn't tell them, mostly because didn't see a long future with this individual and was like, you know what, it's a great exit strategy. Sorry.
Wait, so how long into the relationship did you tell Garrett?
Oh my gosh, probably like a month and a half, a month or 2. It was at the point where I couldn't hide it from him because I made the decision to back out of my lease a little bit early, and I didn't have a place to stay. And so I needed to stay with him. So I effectively moved in with Garrett for like 2 months. And then at that point I needed to tell him.
Surprise.
I'm moving across the country, but I also need to live with you.
Thank you. You're so great.
2 years later, you guys are living together in Oakland. And so it all, happy endings.
Really, really happy endings. Yeah, I even dragged him over to Boston. He was able to spend 1.5 years in Boston with us. It was fun. It was all worth it.
That's amazing.
If it's the right person, they're not spooked by that level of commitment up front.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
Awesome. And then, don't leave the listeners hanging. Did you get into both Yale and obviously HBS? Did you get into Yale as well?
I did get into Yale. I was very happy about that. My ultimate decision to go to HBS was based on 2 things. I had such a great experience during my visit and during my interview process at HBS. I was so impressed with the people that I met there, Julia included. Also just the conversations that I had with people were, I just thought everyone was so interesting and so fascinating and so kind. Like people were so nice. And that kind of blew me away. And then felt like, that's probably a good place to be. Yeah.
Well, we're very glad that is the place you ended up being.
So glad. So glad.
So moving on to the essay specifically, what were you thinking in terms of like, this is how I'm going to approach it. This is what I'm trying to achieve with this particular part of my application. Walk us through what was going through your mind?
I really approached the whole application as a whole. I think it was really helpful to think of everything as like complementing each other, but you didn't want to be redundant in the different pieces. So your resume, your recommendation, your actual essay, and then the short answers. So I wanted to highlight different things, and I kind of mapped it out thematically that way first. And I probably started around the summertime because work was pretty slow and I had some more time. And I was like, okay, I feel like I have like months of time. This is great. So thematically had planned it out and decided that in my essay, I really wanted to showcase my motivations for doing things, the motivations for why I wanted to be in impact investing, the motivations for why I wanted to stay in impact investing and go to school to help me do that better. Because I don't think like my short answer or my recommendations could showcase that. Like my recommendations could really showcase like analytical ability, my leadership ability, my ability to like lead teams. The short answer is just like, oh, here's what you learned. Here's why I did what I did to some degree, but it was like each box you had like 50 characters or something. So it was pretty limited. And I felt like the essay is definitely a place where you're supposed to kind of show them you. Yeah.
That makes a ton of sense. You mentioned you started the application process in the summer. How many versions of your essay do you think you wrote? If you had to go back and see, like it was V, 28 or something.
Yeah, when I looked it up, Jules, this was V15. But I will say, I had a really bad version of this essay that was like pretty different. And probably the week before the application was due, I trashed 80% of it. And then like rewrote the whole thing, pulling like 2 all-nighters and actually just working off of like frantic energy. Wow. I was like, I'm not going to finish. This is so bad. But that's just, I tend to work better under pressure. I am more of a procrastinating type of a person. And so I think that's just what I needed. So it was like a kick in the butt. And really it stemmed from, I bet you'll probably ask this question at some point. I had talked with a friend who had read the essay, and she was kind enough to say, this sounds a little dry. And I was like, oh, like, what do you mean? She was like, it just kind of reads a little boring. And like, I don't really get it. Like all the words sound nice, but I don't get it. I can't, knowing you, I don't understand why you would say this and why this is meaningful to you. And that was at the time so hard to hear, but ultimately it was very helpful.
I mean, who knows, that friend could have made the difference between the yes or the no.
Wow, I owe her a lot.
Wow. That's amazing. Well, if it, we're going to hear your essay later on, how would you describe the changes that you made? Was it like a full topic change? And maybe that's question 1. And question 2 is, how many friends did you have read it? And was that feedback consistent across your reviewers?
What about, I would say the biggest part that changed from my essay was like what my drivers were to go into impact investing to begin with, and my own personal experience. I think there was a lot that I had like leaned on of like, I think a lot of immigrant like children will talk about like their immigration story and their families coming over and the hardships that they experienced. And I feel like I kind of leaned on that. But for me, I think it wasn't so much, I think it didn't come off as super authentic because I was really fortunate in my family. We really loved living in the US. Like my family came here because my dad got a scholarship to study in Ohio, and they were really excited. Like, yes, it was really hard, but I think it was also like the tone I feel like of my childhood, it was very hopeful. And we were always like working really hard to like do more and achieve more. I feel like that, I mean, now that I'm saying that sounds like a great intro to an essay. But I think the way that I had written it out, it just kind of felt really contrite and well, like rehearsed. It was like, people want to hear this story, so you're just kind of writing it. And I think that part was probably the most awkward. The last half of the essay was kind of there. It was kind of there. I just needed a little finessing.
That's such a good tidbit. I mean, it really is a balancing act. Like, yes, you do want to hit on what you want them to hear, but if it doesn't come across as authentic, it will fall flat. So as much like personality that you can actually write into the essay while still getting your points across. I mean, that's why you had at least 15 versions,
Yeah.
It's hard. It's not easy to do that from your first pass.
Totally. And I had asked really good friends to read kind of the original version, and they were all like, oh, this reads good. And had like edited like certain sentences, like grammar and certain words. But no one kind of did the overhaul and was just like, oh, this is okay. It's kind of dry. And at the time, like when you get that feedback, you're like, okay, well, what do you want me to do? I've already spent so much time on this. Like, what am I supposed to do? But what was really encouraging was after I'd written kind of the newer version and it was still really rough, I gave it to one of my coworkers, who's now one of my very, very close friends. She read it, and there was a certain part where she was like, I know exactly what street you're talking about when you describe walking down this street, because we work together. She walks down that street too. And so she was like, this is so real. I absolutely see like you and why you would be here. And that was really, really meaningful to me. I feel like that really captured what I was trying to convey.
Well, Linda, hearing you talk about your essay writing process and just hearing how your friends described it, I'm dying to hear you read it. So could we ask you please to read your essay out loud to the audience?
It would be my honor. Okay, B15. Afternoon approaches, but the San Francisco fog still lingers from the morning. It's a perfect day for a hot bowl of ramen, also known as Chinese hand-pulled noodles, a favorite of mine since childhood. Ramen actually originates from Lanzhou, a metropolitan city near my father's village. That distinction is really key because my father isn't from the city of Lanzhou, but instead from a rural region directly south. And it's because of that distinction that my father's opportunities, through no fault of his own, were limited since birth. The Chinese hukou, or citizen registry system, systematically segregates rural and urban citizens, barring the former from accessing education, jobs, housing, and social programs available only to its city residents. To circumvent those barriers to career and social mobility imposed by Chinese law, my parents emigrated from China to Cleveland when I was about 2 years old. In those days, Ohio's bolstering manufacturing industry was itching to attract foreign talent and offered my father a rare academic scholarship to Cleveland State. My parents' story exemplifies how for countless people in China, the ability to advance their life is determined by factors completely outside of their control. I do not take for granted how fortunate my family is to have achieved a prosperous life here in the United States, and I've committed my career to creating positive social impact to honor the opportunities my parents gave me. But I don't need to travel back to China to see why this work is important. I actually just go out for lunch. My walk for a bowl of ramen takes me straight through the heart of San Francisco's homelessness crisis. Down the block is a substance use detox center, where the residents amble on the sidewalk in many stages of dishevelment. Many are in walkers or wheelchairs, often without shoes. Sometimes I sidestep around a stranger, face down on the street, with a bright orange cap of a hypodermic needle beside his ankle. This tears me in two. I want to help the stranger on the street, but most days I can't help but sidestep around him. I work hard at my job to specifically address issues such as homelessness and substance use disorders, but I also work really hard to avoid eye contact. And maybe you felt that way before too. I can share this one comfort. I am also full of hope. I'm hopeful because there's been tremendous growth to support social impact in the impact investing field. In just 3 years, I've witnessed monumental milestones. Financial giants like BlackRock and TPG creating impact platforms and raising impact funds, federal policy acknowledging the place for environmental, social, and governance factors in investment decisions, and even Harvard Business School spearheading the inaugural Investing for Impact elective course and the creation of a student-run impact investing club. I'm hopeful because I can help that field continue to evolve. Take, for example, the definition of impact. Today, there's enough sophistication in the industry to map impact across a spectrum, from screening out negatives to generating positives. I currently spend my days developing projects on the extreme end of the positive, where returns are linked to measurable human outcomes. My definitions of social impact include things like housing stability for the chronically homeless, more students reading at third grade literacy benchmarks, and keeping a family together. As an impact investor, I hope to drive higher standards for impact definition and measurement to move industry norms further down the spectrum. A Chinese idiom comes to mind. It's called 杜牧难支. Its translation is a single stick will not prop up a whole building. And that reminds me that I cannot accomplish these goals alone. At Harvard Business School, I hope to develop the leadership skills to galvanize diverse individuals towards a common goal. I want to challenge myself by experimenting with different leadership styles and wearing hats I'm not naturally comfortable in. This practice may help me hone the right tools to bring uncommon allies together. There are many things I don't know, and even more things that I don't yet realize I don't know. So I'll also embrace my education both inside and outside the classroom. Surrounded by peers from multicultural backgrounds, bringing expertise across different sectors, I can exponentially expand my scope of learning. Acquiring breadth will allow me to draw from a study of multidisciplinary strategies to apply my future work as an impact investor. I look forward to learning from and engaging with my peers while contributing my own unique perspective in the classroom and in conversation. I think I'd start by asking everyone if they'd like to go grab a bowl of ramen together.
Oh my God, I'm on the floor. That was beautiful.
Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I had like some tears in my eyes. The avoiding eye contact part really got me.
Yeah. You did such a good job of both using sort of imagery and painting this really vivid picture, and then all of a sudden saying, maybe you've been there, right? So you're picturing it, and then you remember that you just draw people in. So, woo, you are a very good writer, Linda.
I know, I was going to say, like, if you ever want to dabble in creative writing, I think you have a shot.
That's okay. I might try dabbling at our at like young adult romance novels at some point. But.
I'll read them.
Second that.
I'll read them. How did it feel reading that out loud? Have you gone back and looked at it since? And yeah, how do you feel right now?
Yeah. Part of me is like feeling very awkward because some parts you're just like, oh, of course you would say that. You're trying so hard. But part of me was also, I still feel really proud of that essay because so much of it like embodied like a lot of how I felt at that moment and things that I was really proud of. And it was really real. And it was a culmination of a lot of hard work. So I was delighted to have the opportunity to read it out loud. I don't think I've ever done that before. And so some of it was just like, oh, is this awkward? But a part of me is also like, I'm so excited to be able to share that story and just, I don't know, share that perspective. Yeah.
Well, not only were the words great, your delivery also was. So you could also have a career in audiobooks, maybe.
Or if we need a third co-host.
Yeah, exactly.
One question, you talk about your family and in particular your father's experience so eloquently. Have you had him read it? Has he seen this before?
Yeah, I think they've seen versions of it. I don't know if I've actually shared with them like the actual final version. So much of it's so funny. I was very upfront with coworkers about my application. I was very hesitant to share with my family because I didn't want to like get their hopes up or disappoint them. So they knew that I was applying at schools, but I didn't really like keep them up to date on like what stage I was or like what I was doing. I just like constantly assured them like, yeah, I'm working on it. Like just working hard. Like And so I feel like maybe it's worth, I don't know, shooting it to them. I don't know.
It's beautiful. Yeah, I think they would. I'm assuming they would love it. It was really like a delight to get to hear you read it.
I mean, it's a great essay regardless, but they also know the outcome that HBS also thought it was a great essay. So they'll go into it and be like, oh, it's going to be great.
I thought it was my GMAT score.
Well, I mean, again, or like, I felt like this was a really strong part of your application. You had mentioned earlier, like comparing yourself to the other people at your company applying. What doubts did you have, or like, what did you feel were your weaknesses in the application?
I remember not just feeling like I had to compare myself to the people at work, but also any past individuals that had been accepted. And also all the profiles on the blogs, on the Poets at Quants, on like that MBA blog. Like I remember just scouring them and being like, do I even have a chance? Am I just like totally out of my league? And half of those you're just like, yeah, I'm like, what am I? I have no right being here. And at some point I felt like I just had to shut that off. It kind of went with my gut and felt like, you know, I might not be the best or the strongest candidate here, but I do have a reasonable chance and I do have a good story. And if not me, then who? Was ultimately what kept me going. And so I felt like it was like validation from really good, real friends, and just trying to shut everything else off.
That's amazing. I think that's a good tidbit. Shut down don't look at the forums. Close your laptop if you're browsing them. If you're waiting to hear responses, it is. I know it's almost impossible to do, but it is time wasted and it's more stress than you need.
Totally. And also, the other place I felt a little bit like I couldn't compare was there was like a section that they were like, highlight your achievements and awards and accomplishments. And I was like, apart from like getting like, I don't know, like most fun at like Tuesday night trivia, like apart from like really ridiculous awards, I was like, I am not like a Forbes 30 under 30. I have not won any accolades for like my nonprofit abilities or being on the board or any like lifetime achievement awards. And that part I was like really just scratching my head to try to put something in, and ultimately just left it blank because I just didn't have anything and everything I put in just sounded ridiculous.
Just going to say, it's got to be like a nice to have. Clearly it's not a requirement to have. But I will say, Linda, you and I got most prepared in negotiations. So we did get an award once we got into HBS. And unfortunately, I think what most prepared in negotiations meant was that it seemed like you had read the material and were prepared, but still got steamrolled.
Right. Right, because some people didn't even care to read the material.
I don't know. After hearing your story about, with Garrett about, both convincing him to let you move in and then saying, hey, by the way, I'm going to business school, you seem like a pretty good negotiator to me.
I just really lean heavily on my charming personality.
Amazing.
So we've been very focused on the application process, but you got in, you went. Looking back on your experience, what do you think you got out of it?
Probably not the answer you're looking for, but because we went and had our glorious HBS time during COVID, I did not expect to spend so much time with my partner, and uniquely so, fell like more and more in love with him. And I really credit school to finally giving me the time and priority to say, I'm really going to prioritize my partner for a little bit. Garrett had just moved to Boston January of 2020, and literally had one glorious month of hanging out and going out into Boston and exploring, and then everything shut down and it was just us. And you don't learn more about an individual than when you spend 24/7 with them in a small bedroom apartment.
No, you don't. And you know, like, even though I know there's some tongue in cheek in that answer, I think it's true, just speaking from my own experience, that part of a lot of the classes at HBS and the visitors who come, they tell you, even though you've like worked as hard in your career as you possibly can, and you're fighting to get up the ladder, once you get to HBS, there, everyone basically says, slow down and enjoy it, and don't take family for granted, and take care of your partnership and and friendships, and that's actually what matters. So I think the HBS curriculum, or at least the HBS alumni that came, kind of would agree with the sentiment that you just put forward.
Such a good point, Jules. I remember one of my favorite relationship therapists and researchers, Alex will share my love for Dr. John Gottman. He was quoted, I think, from like 3 different professors of ours. Like 3 of them had cited like this relationship researcher and talking about fulfillment and happiness, and having a life of success is not just based on your career, your accolades, your awards, but it's really about like family and personal relationships. And I really took that to heart. And so I think in addition to kind of focusing on my partner, I also hope that I focused on a few very, very good friendships. And I'm not the type of person to have a ton of friends, but I have, a couple of very, very good friends that I know will go like miles for me, and I would do the same. And I really, really appreciate that. Yeah. Classes also were fine. They were very good. They're very instructive. I learned a lot from negotiation. I continue to use those tactics today. I think those are things you're going to get out of the program. Like, you're going to get a great experience and education from the case study method. You're going to be challenged. I think I didn't expect some of the other things.
One more question about your experience while at HBS. We heard your essay about and sort of the desire to sort of make a big change. I think, alluding to wanting to stay in social impact, and now you are working for a mental health startup. So certainly from a values perspective, very aligned. How did your time at HBS help you make that, I wouldn't say full pivot, but shift in where you wanted to go with your career? What were some of the resources or opportunities that helped you get there?
Good question. I leaned, I think, heavily into like how people build like businesses and build organizations. How do you take like a concept and an idea from scratch and actually like build a company out of it? I really admired like founders, right? To a certain degree. I do not want to be a founder myself. I think Alex knows this about me. I will be your first joiner. I'll be the first like founder joiner. I love being in that role. But I really love building alongside a team towards like something that's really meaningful to me. There were a couple of classes that really stood out. I think Founder's Journey was really enlightening. Some of those stories were not always positive and ended in a giant IPO and people being rich. Some of it ended up in like a $10 million divorce settlement between like a joint like husband and wife going and doing business together, which was totally shocking and horrifying. So I think that class really helped kind of open my eyes to the environment and the ecosystem that was startups. LTV, launching tech ventures, was really instrumental to that. And then I also think BSSE, which is the business. Oh gosh, you got to cut this.
Building a
We're keeping this in.
Sustainable something enterprise.
It was
What's
remote school. Give us a break, everybody. We don't
Yes.
remember the exact names of our classes. We did them on Zoom.
Well, anyway, I actually thought I really loved that class. I think just like the concepts that you learned there about like building innovation into your like company, like when do you actually become obsolete and like need to like change course. A lot of really great concepts there. And then
I do use
like jobs to be done.
Yeah, I was going to say, I use the jobs to be done framework all the time at my company. And so listeners just Google what the job to be done framework is. It's really good for, especially a startup situation where product market fit hasn't quite been nailed down. So it's really, okay, what is the job that we're doing with this product?
I think that's a good point. I think a lot of the times people think that there's a big gap between academics and then the practicalities of the job that you have. And I think, while not for all classes all the time, there were so many nuggets and frameworks and things that you could take directly from the classes and content. And even, now we're less than a year out, apply them. So it is very, very practical knowledge.
Yes. And I would say too, even if I can't pinpoint which case or which class it was in, I feel like there's just like suddenly like a pattern recognition that you develop after reading so many cases and like reading so many stories about like companies and businesses that you're like, wait a second, this feels familiar. Like, I feel like I've been here before. I feel like that's kind of helped me. It's given me better instincts, I would say.
No, that is amazing. And we'll, hopefully we can interview you again in the future and hear more about, whatever, if you're hire number 1 or 2 at some multi-billion-dollar mental health healthcare startup, we'll be excited to hear, even more reflections on how the education has impacted and helped you. So I think to wrap things up here, this has been wonderful to get to chat, but we want to end with some fun rapid fires. So these are, just answer with a quick question or whatever comes to mind first, no matter how ridiculous or silly it might sound. Yeah, let's get started. Alex, you want to go ahead?
Yeah. So what was an HBS interview question that took you by surprise?
First question that they asked me, I had put like that I played the ukulele on my resume, and the woman's first question was like, so how did you get into the ukulele? And I was like, what? How did you know that? Oh, wait, you read my entire application package and I included that in there.
Yeah, they do not miss the tiny details.
It was just kind of like, oh, okay. Well, it's just so cute.
What next question? What was the best piece of advice that someone gave you for your application?
Oh, my friend Shelly was a year before us, was so instrumental to my process. She told me that there is a separate like consulting service for the HBS interview, and I didn't know that. I didn't use consultants, but instead I only paid for that one interview service. And I actually think that just gave me so much like peace of mind and it made me feel like I was prepared. Otherwise, I think I would have been so nervous, just like a ball of nerves.
That's amazing. We'll follow up with you later and link to what the name of that service, if people are interested in looking into that, we can link that in the episode notes.
What stereotype would you say, or what stereotype about HBS would you say is true, and maybe one that proved to not be true?
I think the stereotype that like everyone there is like very smart and motivated and hardworking, I absolutely think that is true. But the stereotype that like people are very pompous or arrogant, I felt like that was just proven so wrong. There were absolutely individuals like that, but in a class of like 900 people, I just steered clear of those folks. Like, not everyone's your person. That's okay. You find your people.
Obviously, your application worked well, but is there anything that you would do differently if you had to go back and do it again?
I would have tried to do more a little bit earlier. I think maybe like trying to like put some pressure on myself would have been really helpful. The last week before the deadline was just so exhausting. I don't think I actually did any work. I was just doing my application. It takes a lot out of you. And I honestly thought that I would get ready in time for the GSB application, and I just did it and was just like, oh, I'm just not going to do it. I can't.
Well, as someone who also had to take the GMAT 3 times, I just didn't budget that in. Yeah. So I was rushing on like the short answer and the resume and all sorts of stuff. So I definitely empathize with you on that. Who is the coolest alumni or class guest that you got to meet or hear from?
I've been Joanna Gaines. I don't think they're alumni though. I think they were just guests, but I just like really love, just really love Fixer Upper. It's just so fun. And it was really cool to talk to them. They were really sweet.
Nice.
I also thought that one guy, oh gosh, the French who blow the watch guy.
Jean-Claude Biver.
Jean-Claude Biver. Oh, what a gem. What a gem of a man. Oh, Jean-Claude Biver. Love that man. Great man. Yes. Oh, that and Toby Johnson. Toby Johnson was just like a amazing superstar, like idol.
And for the listeners who don't know, so obviously you guys might know Joanna Gaines from, I think mostly from TLC, but Jean-Claude Biver and Toby Johnson are both case protagonists, and often for HBS, they, you read the case and then surprise, they're sitting in the class and you have to sit and talk about what they did wrong in front of them or what they did right in those two in particular's case. And those were particularly colorful guests.
Would you describe yourself as an introvert or an extrovert?
I am an introvert with extrovert tendencies. I like to be around people. I gain a lot of motivation and energy from people, but then I really do have to kind of sit back and recharge.
Would you say you're analytical or creative?
I'm much more analytical, but desperately want to be creative.
Cautious or bold?
100% cautious. Very cautious. Yes. I can be bold in like confined and like structured scenarios, where you're like, it's like very safe.
If you were going to Hogwarts, what house would you be in?
Hufflepuff.
I love that you own that.
Hufflepuffs forever.
And when asked in a formal setting, such as a job interview or business school interview, what do you say your biggest weakness is? And what is your biggest weakness actually?
Oh, I typically say that I am quite deferential in meetings and in settings. It's very hard for me to kind of like push back or say no immediately. I think in reality, that is somewhat true, only because in my mind, I'm just like, hell no. But what I'll say is be like, oh, well, we'll try to make that happen, but I'll have to let you know whether or not that's realistic. So in my mind, I'm pretty like, there's no way we're going to do that. So I actually don't think in reality that is a weakness. What I actually think my weakness is I have a desire to be liked by the people I work with. I really did like my colleagues in the previous firms that I was at. And more, I'm coming to realize that I do not have to be friends with my colleagues. Like I do not have to be best friends with my direct reports. In fact, that might even be frowned upon to a certain degree. And that's been a little bit difficult. I do want to be friends and liked by people, but sometimes you just can't do that. You just got to get things done.
That's a good one. Is there anything that you regret about your business school experience?
Yeah, good question. I think I played it pretty safe. I knew what I really liked, and I knew the things that I wasn't really interested in. And now and there are things that I was just kind of like, oh, I'm not going to go to that. Like, I'm just like not interested at all. Or I'm just like, oh, I don't like those people. I'm not going to hang out with them. And kind of drew lines pretty quickly, both as a way to like, there's just so many like asks of your time at school. It was a way to like prioritize the things that were really important to me. But now looking back, there were things that I'm like, oh, wow, I kind of wish like I had that opportunity. Maybe I should have just given it a shot. Should have just like tried it. What's the worst that could happen? Maybe have finally a real embarrassing moment and not some like tough one. There's just like so many resources. And now I wish I had all of those again. Like it's such a unique time to be so like you're living like across the street from like your best friends, right? Like some of my really close friends lived in my building. Like you guys lived like less than like 5-10 minutes away, and now you're across the country. I really wish I would have like, I don't know, just did like, hey, it's Tuesday, I'm bored, I'm coming over, let's hang out. because now I just miss those times so much, and wish we could do that more.
Agreed. We miss them too. We're going to come crash in Oakland very, very soon.
Yeah, I'm ready.
So last but not least in our rapid fire, and I know you said you're not creative, but I trust that you're going to be creative with this one. If you had to pick a new mascot for HBS, what would it be?
What's the original mascot?
I have no idea. So if you had to pick a mascot,
Crimson.
a color.
Oh man, what would it be? Maybe it would be like something red. I don't know. I think all the mascots are like really like ferocious, like animals, or like bobcats. I think that was like the NYU one. We were the NYU Violets, and then only for like basketball games or something, we were like the Bobcats, because Violet was like aggressive. No, maybe we could be like the HBS like hippogriffs or something.
I like it. I
love it.
That would be appropriate.
That's perfect. They're kind of aggressive, but like likable once you get to know them, right? Which
just don't cross them. Like, we will destroy you. But once you're our friend, like, we'll pick you up and we'll go for a fun ride.
Love it. Well, thank you so much, Linda. This was very enjoyable. Hopefully it was a enjoyable experience for you as well. And we really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today.
We loved getting to talk to you and getting to hear your essay, and just, even though Alex and I, like, we know you, it was an opportunity for us to also get to know you deeper too. And it was wonderful. So maybe to leave our audience, could you leave us with a last piece of parting advice as the listeners approach their MBA application?
Yeah, just go for it. It's so exhausting, but I think even just the exercise of going through it, and I even told myself before, I was like looking at, like, I feel like it's easy to say that now once you've like gotten in, but I honestly think, like, if I'd gotten into any of the schools that I applied to, I would have been so grateful and so happy and felt so validated, because I'd gone through the process of like applying and really like being hard in terms of like, who am I really? What do I really want? And so much of that introspective process has kind of kept and stayed with me today, in terms of like, what are my priorities? Like, what do I really want? What is important to me? So I think building in that practice was really valuable, and it's like so grueling and it's so hard. But just like grab a big glass of wine and just get through it.
That's it for this week. We hope you enjoyed listening as much as we enjoyed our conversation. Don't forget, please rate, review, and recommend us to a friend if you enjoyed what you heard. You can find us on Instagram and DM us questions. We'd love to hear what you want to hear about, so we can tailor these episodes to make them more impactful. Until next time, thank you.